Hello everybody and welcome to Free UFC Bet Picks. Thanks for tuning into our show today. We are breaking down UFC Vegas 16, Hermansson versus Vettori. These are going to be early predictions after watching tons of tape. We will have our post-weigh-in video on Friday like normal. We'll have our final bets, parlays, daily fantasy advice, all that good stuff. In this video, we are breaking down the main event, Hermansson versus Vettori. So let's get right into it. Hermansson does have a 1-inch height advantage on Vettori and a 3.5-inch reach advantage. The betting lines right now have Vettori as the favorite at -134 and Hermansson as the underdog at +110. Both of these guys, really impressive fighters, should be an amazing main event here. What are you thinking about this one?
It's a really exciting one. Jack was supposed to be fighting Darren Till, then supposed to be fighting Kevin Holland. Two really exciting fights, very different, a striker versus grappler matchup, if you will. And now Marvin Vettori comes in to replace Kevin Holland. And Vettori's not a household name, but he's a good fighter. Really, you could tell, he's the favorite, obviously. But, really interesting fight here. So we're going to talk about the last three, at least the last three fights for each. We watch every week, 12 fights. All 24 fighters, we watch at least their last 3 fights, sometimes up to like their last 10 fights, sometimes some of their opponents' fights. We got to get some context around what does it mean to beat one fighter or another, right? So just tons and tons of tape study dating back to last week. So we'll get into it. So, we all remember Jack Hermansson's last fight against Kevin Gastelum. Gastelum, a former 170er, but a good fighter, really good hands. He was, expected to have the boxing edge. I actually picked Gastelum. I thought he would, have a fine time fighting off the takedowns and would have a big edge in the boxing, similar to how people think Vettori is going to win. Kelvin looked shredded. He was in great shape, but he's still a small 185er. It was, for as far as first round submissions go, there were a couple things a little bit concerning for Jack. There was a time where Jack was just backing up. He slips a punch. He gets the double unders, and he starts going for the trip. But Kelvin did kind of a nice toss, like a hip toss. He just used that momentum of Jack leaning forward, trying to get the trip, and he tossed Jack and lands on top. And that's a little bit worrisome, right? The problem is Kelvin just had kind of bad fight IQ, and he won it out. Once he realized he was on top, he's like, oh, no, this is exactly what Jack wanted me to do. Tries standing up. And Jack's immediately looking for that heel hook. Kelvin gets safe, comes back down to get himself safe, again, to get out of the heel hook, and again just keeps standing up in his guard. It was something I wouldn't call it fluky. We all know that Jack's got the submission game. His best chance for a win was to submit Kelvin, so I can't call it lucky that he submits him. But it was just not a very good fight IQ by Kelvin there. And normally Kelvin shows great fight IQ. So it was an interesting situation there. But, when a submission artist gets their locks on you when you're dry, it's tough to get out of those. And it was just a rough night for Kelvin. Easy work for Jack. He's such a great post-fight interview. When he wins, he's just so kind of entertaining and fun to see. So it was cool to see, but not as dominant as it would appear on paper, for these Tapology predictors who just scroll through Tapology and waste 20 minutes of your time. Before that, he gets knocked out by Jared Cannonier. Like, the only guys who have beat Jack in the last 5 years are Thiago Santos and Jared Cannonier. To call them knockout artists is an understatement, Vettori's got nice striking, but is it that level? The short answer is no, right? So it's interesting, but Jack was doing a nice job against Jared in the striking, going for low kicks. He goes for the takedown. Jared had nice takedown defense. That's the story of this fight. Jared had good takedown defense. Jack tries the takedown again, turns the corner, and he gets his back. But even when he got Jared's back, he had trouble holding. Even when Jack got Jared's back, he had trouble holding Jared down. Jack's striking is pretty basic, but it's good. He keeps the jab nice and tight. He throws the leg kicks. But when Jack has trouble getting you down, he ends up going for these just like kind of naked takedown attempts with no setup. They're very predictable. They're very easy to defend. And Jared had a fine time, an easy time. We know how, Jared's a former heavyweight, former 205er. He's a big middleweight, good wrestling, even though that's not what he's known for. So, you get something of a pass when Jared fights off your takedowns, but just, it was not great fight IQ. They were not set up by Jack. They were just poor, shoddy takedown attempts that Jared had no trouble fighting off. Jack must not do that against Vettori here.
Yeah.
There was a time where Jack got Jared's back and tries going for like a suplex, and he lands on his head. He just landed like he didn't fully twist Jared around, and so just kind of a lackluster offensive wrestling performance from Jack. There's a couple things that matter in this Vettori Hermansson fight, and the offensive wrestling from Hermansson matters a lot.
Yeah.
So the second round starts. Jack's worried. Jack doesn't want any of the stand up. Jack wants to level change and get the fight to the ground. Jared throws a nice jab, right uppercut, and it lands right on the button for Jack, who was ducking down, trying to level change. Great performance by Jared. Bad performance for Jack. Before that, he wins a unanimous decision against Souza, Ronaldo Jacare Souza. It's a little bit misleading, because it's a unanimous decision, but that was a close fight, real close fight. We know how good Souza is or was. He's a little bit past his prime, but Souza was a big favorite in that Hermansson fight. Jack was on short notice, and Jack was busy in the striking, getting takedowns the first 2 rounds. Really, that's what won it for him, is the first 2 rounds. It was just good fight IQ from Jack. Technical striking, well-timed takedowns, and he's obviously great at jiu-jitsu, so he was able to stay out of trouble from Jacare. Yeah. Round 3, though, Jacare, and this is a 5-round fight, by the way. Jacare, round 3, drops him in the striking. It started looking real bad for Jack real quick. Round 4, Jack gets back to the technical striking, keeping his range, using his height, using those low kicks. He lands a nice uppercut. He was landing some nice hands. The tide turned back for Jack in round 4. Round 5, Souza had no cardio, and Hermansson got it done. So some nice things there for Jack. Good striking against, Souza, who's not a striker. Good submission defense against Souza, who is an all-time great submission artist. There's some things that are applicable and relevant to this Vettori fight. The main thing is that even Ronaldo Souza in the 3rd round landed some heavy hands on Jack, and that's not a good thing. Before that, he gets a 49-second arm-in guillotine against David Branch. It was a nice foot sweep to get it to the floor. He's got the knee on the belly, preventing Branch from moving to side control to get safe. We know how good Jack is on the ground. Before that, round 1 guillotine against Gerald Meerschaert. Meerschaert, we saw him get knocked out immediately by Khamzat with one punch, literally one punch. One significant strike thrown by Khamzat in the fight in a KO. But, Meerschaert's a good fighter. Jack was throwing a nice low kick in that fight as well, but he leaves himself a little bit exposed, I was seeing in that fight. He throws the low kick, but his hands are down, his chin straight up in the air. There was one time, actually, where Meerschaert almost landed, like, he was just a hair away from landing a huge, heavy overhand counter on Jack. But, in the scrambles, Jack had the big edge in the scrambles, which is not surprising. In those scrambles, Meerschaert left himself open. Jack gets him down, ground and pound, guillotines him. So we know what Jack wants to do. He wants to submit you. He throws nice technical striking, but it's extremely basic, as we know. He's decent with the throws. It didn't look good against Jared because Jared's so strong and heavy that he just landed on his own head. But normally he's got good Greco-Roman throws, and he's an absolute submission wizard. He gets stronger as the fight goes on. He's landed like 50 plus strikes in the 4th round, 50 plus strikes in the 5th round for not being a striker. He has good cardio. There's just some really worrisome things. At first glance, you're like, oh my God, Jack Hermansson, he's been training. He's been training for 2 killers, Till and Holland. We got Marvin Vettori. Who the hell is that? Hopefully if you're watching this, you know who Marvin Vettori is, but he's not a household name, right? And you're like, oh my God, how is Marvin Vettori the favorite? Well, Marvin Vettori has world-class, all-time, top 10 all-time UFC takedown defense. It's 88% or something. You got to follow MMA by the numbers on Instagram, and he does a podcast. He's amazing. If you know Kurt Goldsberry for NBA, where He turns everything in NBA into a graph, into math. It's just so cool to see. That's MMA by the numbers for fighting. Follow MMA by the numbers. You know, so Vettori has world-class takedown defense, but he hasn't really fought a ton of vicious wrestlers. He's fought Israel Adesanya, you know, and like, so it's a little bit skewed, but it is a very solid takedown defense. And so, you know, Jack's offensive wrestling that we've been talking about, it not being the best, it's a worry. Vettori's got nice technical boxing. It's pretty basic as well. But he's not a knockout puncher by any means, but he's got heavy hands. It's kind of like, I think he could get a knockout sometime soon, and no one should be surprised. You know, he doesn't have any recently, but he's got nice pop on his punches. He's a thick fighter. And he's got solid cardio for being such a thick 185er. I have to assume he cuts quite a bit of weight, but he's never been finished. And he hasn't, but you know, like I said, he hasn't knocked anybody out in a long time. So his last fight against Karl Roberson, when I think of Karl Roberson, I think of a striker that Glover Teixeira was trying to take down, and Karl starts landing those Travis Brown elbows on him and almost finished Glover, right? Like Karl's not a good wrestler. Karl's not the best fighter anyway, you know, in any sense. He came in like he barely made the weight limit. He came in like 5 pounds heavy against Vettori, had no gas at all. But there were some interesting scrambles, and the scrambles that Roberson was able to create and the opportunities he was able to create are very promising for Hermansson, because if Hermansson had those scrambles, the fight would be over for sure. He would have Vettori's neck 1,000%. There was a time where Vettori's got Karl Roberson up in the air. Karl Roberson does something I cannot recall seeing from anyone else. He's in the air, gonna get slammed. He literally puts both feet straight up behind him, kicks off the fence, and creates like this rolling scramble and lands on top. It was pretty cool, you know, but in half guard, you know, he was like, Vettori finally gets him down. He's in half guard. He's got his forearm on Karl's neck. Karl was gasping for air, just audibly wheezing. No cardio. He had an injury coming in, had trouble making weight. Weird fight. You know, you can't take a whole lot away from it. And Karl Roberson's not that great anyway. Before that, Vettori beat Andrew Sanchez in a unanimous decision, and it was a pretty boring fight. You know, Andrew's not a great striker, but we like Andrew. I actually picked him over Wellington Turman, largely because Wellington Turman missed weight. It's so important to watch those, you know, post-weigh-in videos. But, you know, that was a huge underdog win. I often forget to mention when I list off our underdog cashes over the year. You know, Andrew Sanchez is one of those, and I often forget to mention him. But, you know, Vettori made it look very easy against Sanchez. You know, nice just body hooks, you know, combos from Marvin. And, you know, when Andrew would try to change levels and duck, he landed a real nice straight knee up the middle that landed on the chin of Andrew. Just a good technical job by Marvin. But it didn't take anything too special. He wasn't doing anything too special in the striking. He was just throwing out like naked body kicks with no setup, and they're landing because Andrew Sanchez is not a good striker. So it was really just a technical boxing clinic by Marvin. Probably easier than most of Marvin's sparring sessions. Before that, a really impressive unanimous decision win against Cesar Ferreira. The first 2 rounds, it was just heavy counters by Marvin. Marvin loves to counter, you know, and whether you're throwing a low kick or a jab, he loves coming you know, over the top with an overhand right. He was doing a ton of that against Cesar Ferreira, and then really good fight IQ, well-timed takedowns. First 2 rounds were almost a mirror image of each other. Just Marvin Vettori striking, throwing overhands, and getting those nice takedowns. Round 3, Cesar was gassed, and he was getting lit up, and he kept going for these really poor takedown attempts. That's really the story of the fight. I'm trying to look at my notes and see if there's anything I'm forgetting, but that's really it. Before that, I think part of the reason why Vettori is a favorite in this fight is because he had a split decision loss to Israel Adesanya. He's the only guy who's ever in MMA beaten, you know, won a round on one judge's no, he won a round, but he won the card on a judge's scorecard. He, you know, according to one judge, he beat Israel Adesanya. That's just more than anything. Like, Israel won that fight for sure. It's just an example of poor judging, but, you know, it was a good performance by Marvin. You know, Izzy was just styling on the whole time. You know, Marvin in the 3rd round, when Izzy was tired, he was just kind of cage laying, praying Izzy. Izzy knew he had it in the bag. He ends up getting a takedown on Izzy. It didn't matter. It was all just garbage time, you know. The first 2 rounds, Izzy was just styling on him. So, Before that, he had a majority draw against Omari Akhmedov, who's a good fighter. We saw him lose to Chris Weidman not too long ago. But, if you play the UFC video game, especially UFC 3, we saw a lot. If you played middleweight, Akhmedov was the top alphabetical fighter. So for us gamers, we all know Akhmedov. He's a good fighter. So what's the story here? Vettori's got good technical boxing against guys who don't really have good boxing. When you have the boxing edge over him, the striking edge over him, like Izzy does, he does a nice job of laying praying, holding you against the cage. A lot of people are expecting a finish here rather quickly. I cannot believe that the over 2.5 is plus money. So, part of it, there's a couple things. We want to see what Marvin looks like at weigh-ins. He's on short notice. He's always training, but he's on short notice technically, right? We know Jack's ready. He's been training for a 5-round fight against 2 studs for a long time. The over 2.5 is, I think, like a lock. I think for sure this fight is going to be a little bit technical and a little bit conservative because, Jack doesn't want to rush in there and get knocked out. Marvin doesn't want to get taken down and have Jack on top of him. I think you're going to see a conservative first round or so. Second round, if Marvin gets taken down, he's got good enough takedown defense that he can, defend some submissions. But he's got really good takedown defense, as we mentioned. So, I kind of see this just playing itself out on the feet in something of a low volume affair. And so the over 2.5, I really, really, really like. I do think that late in the fight, Hermansson's gonna submit him. Hermansson by submission in round 3 is like plus 2,000. Hermansson by submission in round 4 plus 2,800. Round 5 plus 4,000. I really like all 3 of those. Vettori's not gonna knock him out cold, and that's kind of his only path to victory. The more scrambles, the sloppier it gets. It's gonna favor Jack, and he should have the cardio edge because he's been training for 5 rounds. So obviously everyone knows this is one of the toughest fights to pick. It's a tough line. It's a thin line. The experts are kind of half and half on it.
Yeah.
If you force yourself to pick a winner in every fight, you're not going to do great. Last week we picked almost every fight wrong because every underdog won. But we won our bets. Why? Because we're selective. We picked a couple of over-unders. We picked a couple of winners. We passed on Parisian Kamaka. And, I hope that's why you enjoy this channel. We give you real tape-watching advice, and knowledge. We give you real fight advice. We don't just scroll through Tapology for 10 minutes and be like, oh, he's a 2-1 favorite. Oh, weird. Oh, he lost to so-and-so. These guys don't know how to pronounce these people's names. They've clearly never watched a single fight. Otherwise, you would hear this fighter's name like 50 times. From the announcer, from the judge, from Joe Rogan. Thank you all for watching. We appreciate your support. We don't talk smack about other prediction pages. We stand up for them in their comments. We watch their live shows, and we give them love and stand up for them when they have trolls in the comments. Mm-hmm. On our IG page, we're nonstop shouting out other pages. But I hope it's clear as day that you're in the right freaking place right now. Yeah. Because we do hours and hours and hours of tape study to give you meaningful advice. We don't just scroll absentmindedly through Tapology. We're not just driving around in our car for 20 minutes and tell you, oh, Justin James gets gassed.
Yeah. Preparing weeks in advance for this stuff.
So here's some real good advice. You want to wait for the weigh-ins in this? Pick the over. And you might pick Jack to submit in 3, 4, and 5.
Yeah. And even though
I'm fired up. It's the first one of the night. We got a long night. We got a long night ahead of us.
Yeah, might as well get fired up now. I mean, we're starting with the main event this time. Doing separate videos now just to kind of switch things up a little bit. I don't know.
She's popping highlights on. So in the future, we've been talking about how we want to get highlights on. It's just so much work. So this extended look at the main event, as you've already watched it, you already saw. It's got highlights on it. Pretty soon, every fight video is going to have highlights on it. But I hope sometimes the highlights can be misleading anyway. I hope these breakdowns that we give you on their past few fights is really meaningful for you.
Yeah. And we will have some high and some low lights.
Exactly.
So you can see their weak points as well.
Exactly.
And even though you said this would probably be a low volume fight, do want to mention their DraftKings prices. We've got Vettori at 8,200 and Hermansson at 8,000. Kind of pricey, but what are you thinking?
No, that's I think you want high exposure to this. I think those are decent prices. It's a 5-round fight. So let's say they strike for 25 minutes. The winner's going to score decently high. If one of them gets finished, the winner's going to score high. I think you want high exposure to this fight both ways. Like maybe if you play 10 lineups, I think you want 5 with Jack, 4 with Marvin, and maybe only 1 without these guys. I think you want high exposure to it.
Yeah. All right, I think that about does it for Vettori versus Hermansson. Should be a really exciting fight here. Yeah, make sure you tune in Friday for our post weigh-in video. We'll have a lot more insight there. Like we said, weigh-ins are very important for a lot of the fights. So yeah, make sure you tune in.
Turn in, baby. Turn up. Turn up and tune in.
Yes.
Oh my God, that's our new thing.
All right.
All right.
Thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you next time.